over John Uyan. Uyan's going to commit. He gets off to the inside. There's Dominic and he's going to finish. He tried his best. How did he catch it? John Uyan has gone.
All right, welcome in everybody for the 1 hour of Spa for the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. The Hypercars are out, the GT cars are out, and it is going to be an excellent multi-class race around Spa. I've been armed with information about the strategy for the GT cars. I'm familiar with the strategy for the Hypercars, so it should be a race where we do know what's going on with tires, with fuel, and the potentials for both of those as the race progresses. For the moment, though, it's me, Troy Uyan, here with you guys in qualifying for the GTs, currently on board with Jamie Zalecki. And we're all sort of just shuffling through for our outlaps. A couple minutes into qualifying, but outlaps yet to be completed. We have a few people who have begun their, or are about to begin their first flying laps of the day. 1 hour of Spa, and no threat of rain. That was a thing I was actually kind of considering. I was worried about, but checking the calendar and the weather forecast, no threat of rain. We should be good to go for a dry running here at Spa. And hopefully all is going well with the broadcast and audio quality. So, Zalecki was the fastest GT in qualifying, so I'm expecting the Aston Martin Vantage to set the pace again in practice was the fastest. I'm expecting him to set the pace again in our qualifying session, so we'll follow him through here. Actually, that's a little bit of a tail happy Jamie Zalecki through the first hairpin, so that is not going to be the one setting the pace. Not with that kind of entry. Here's Tom Lane, purple sector 1, but obviously contending with traffic. We have the likes of John Mayer, Craig Dans, Matt Boyce have all set initial times in sector 1. Tom Lane remains the pace setter. Barry DiMazzo sets purple sector 2, one of the few to only set a sector 2 times, however, so we gotta wait for more cars to shuffle through. 10 minutes goes quick around Spa. Tom Lane, purple sector 2. 10 minutes goes very, very quick around Spa. And as in one of the previous rounds, I think we're a little down on GT Pro cars today, but we have an army of GT cars as Lane definitely having to contend with traffic. Despite that, is still the pace setter through purple sectors. Barry DiMazzo sets the pace at a 2:20. Brendan Gant at 2:17 to match it. Those times will fall. Tom Lane bumper drafting across the line with a 2:18.4 of his own, so Brandon Gant remains the pace setter at a 2:17.6. Let's pick up Mr. Gant, as he would be looking at a second round. This is one of the GT Pro cars, of course. Roland Hagenars is the leader of the AMS at a 2:18.1. Tom Lane ended up slotting into third. Matt Boyce, 2:18.9, slots into sixth overall. And that will be decently high in the AM category as well. Luca Viani has slotted into fourth with the 2:18.7, so the times are beginning to come down. We would expect around the 2:17s with a clear track and these guys on the limit. I would expect that actually they might be able to break into the 2:16s. It's possible. That was just an opening lap. And if I look at practice times that have been done, the fastest practice time overall was set by Benenka at a 2:15.6. Not that we're going to see that time today. Obviously, track conditions, temperature, the amount of rubber on the road, that all plays into it. But the cars are capable of going around the track at a pretty rapid pace. So we'll hang with Gant here for the moment. He is purple Sector 1 and Sector 2. Roland Hagenars, Tom Lane, and Luca Viani, nothing to match. Luca Viani, a horrible first sector, so he's probably going to bail out of that lap. And Tom Lane has bailed out of that lap. That's interesting. Did I miss something? Because I was looking at timing. Did he have a bit of a spin there? Let me go back just a second. No, he just pulled off. He pulled off going through the kink. That's very interesting from Brandon Gant because he was purple Sector 1, purple Sector 2. He was already setting the pace, and that would have been a storming lap for Brandon Gant, but he pulls off through the kink, does not complete the lap. Question mark. See who else is on a flyer. Dean Sheesby, leader in our GT AMs for the moment. Dean Sheesby, personal best, Sector 1 on top of it all. So the likes of Tom Lane and Matt Boyce fighting for the AM Championship will have to contend with Dean Sheesby's current benchmark at a 2:17.9. However, as I say that, George Andelitis in the pros goes 2:17.6. Jamie Zalecki goes absolute outright fastest in the Aston Martin with a 2:17.3, 2/10 faster on our GT Pro leader. Zalecki sends the absolute benchmark in qualifying here with a 2:17.3. Yeah, as I say, 3/10 up on Brandon Gant's GT Pro time, with just a fraction of a second back to George Angelides in third. Now, someone who is absolutely lit up on the timing screens appears to be Matt Boyce. He set the fastest Sector 1. Matt Boyce in the Lamborghini, and that's not just on AMs, that is on, including both classes. Obviously, it would be because there's currently an AM topping the timesheets. Vinicius Gonzalez goes P4 with a 2:17.8. The guys in the 2:17s are definitely the ones setting the pace, and there's only 5 of them. Matt Boyce was on pace to grab one of his own, but his second sector appears to leave something to be desired. Second sector is about a second and a half down on some of his competitors, so that second sector was definitely leaving a lot to be desired. As we're running down to the tail end of qualifying, Matt Boyce will actually not get another lap after this. So P12 overall, and he's actually going to bail out. That second sector really did him in, but he had the purple Sector 1. Let's check in with Dean Sheesby, who's not going to have time to complete another lap. And Zalecki does set, again, that purple Sector 1, 7/10 up, exactly the same as Boyce's Sector 1. So Zalecki, maybe on his flying lap, had a low. Hagenars sets the fastest time with a 2:17.3, pips Zalecki just by a fraction of a second. Zalecki across the line now with a 2:17.5, cannot get back over Roland Hagenars, misses out by 2/10 of a second. His standing time, less than a 1/10 of a second. Roland Hagenars in the GT AMs is going to set the pace for GT qualifying. And we're going to switch here in a moment to be looking at our Hypercars, of course. But Brandon Gant, it looks like, of the 4 or so GT Pros, is going to be the one setting the pace. Brandon Gant, is he actually on a flying lap? Brandon Gant might be on a flying lap. And actually, Manuel Stoll in front of him is as well. We have a few people who got through the line just on time. So while the Hypercars are doing their outlap, moving about 15-ish seconds a lap quicker, these guys are still finishing their flyer, and Brandon Gant might be about to snatch pole from Hagenars. He goes through the final chicane and across the line. Brandon Gant takes the pole position at the last second, dips into the 2:16 range by 0.2 of a second, 0.5 faster than Roland Hagenar's absolutely amazing time there in his GT. However, we still have Tom Lane in the mix, who goes second fastest. Tom Lane's second fastest, left it to the last second, but he will end up on pole in the GT AMS. Over 2 minutes after the session time technically expired for the GTs who have the first 10 minutes in the qualifying session, we were continuing because they hit the line, they crossed the line rather, right as the time was ticking down. They had enough time to do their 2-minute lap, 2-minute and 16-second lap. But let's check in with our Hypercars. So Brandon Gant and Tom Lane, congrats on the pole positions to them. Daniel Kirby is going to be our initial pace setter in the Hypercars. The Bugatti Bolide, he was the fastest car in practice. Over half a second over John Uyon, who was the winner of the Thursday race. Yeah, the time ticks down so fast. Like, they're already just one outlap, one flyer, and there's only 6 minutes left to go. This is such a long track, of course. And you can see the difference in GT cornering speed and apex speed, especially through some of the sweepers, the higher speed corners, compared to the Hypercars here. Now, obviously, the delta times are quite exaggerated, you know, 5 seconds up, not 5/10 up, because that's still comparing to Brandon Gant's pace-setting time in the GTs. And the timing board has everybody on fire, because all of the Hypercars are, of course, able to pace what is currently set there by the GTs. So Dan Kirby is going to go P1 with a 58.3. That's a very strong time indeed. Uyon slots in 2 seconds off. Graf slots in 2 seconds off. Dan Kirby's time is actually exceptional. That's an exceptional way to set the pace in qualifying. Francisco Con says 1:59.7 is the nearest competitor, still 1.4 seconds off, with Jason Whitehead and the Valkyrie slotting into third with a 2-minute dead. And Dan Kirby still goes purple in Sector 1 off his own time. It's less than a 10th, but he's right back on it. Jerry Chen goes 6th fastest in the leading Hypercar AM, with Nielsen Vestergaard in 8th and Bob Robertson in 9th in the Seoul Toyota, I believe. Nice to see a Toyota on the grid. Let's hang with Kirby as he continues his run. Now, we do have a dark horse here, which is Ross Smith has a purple sector time. Ross Smith is about to cross the line now. Oh, that's interesting. So that's, I was kind of mentioning this last time. Sometimes as they're just doing their outlap, it lights up like they just did the fastest time in the history of Spa. And in that moment, Dan Kirby has bailed out of his lap. So, Francisco Contes in the Ferrari, one of the few Ferraris, Norm Graf and himself, are the only Ferrari FXXK Evos. And yes, I really had to slow down to say all that. I've actually never said that out loud. Ferrari FXXK Evo. However, Francisco is not improving on his own time, despite a personal best Sector 3. Few tenths down in both Sectors 1 and 2. Will have to continue to settle for second. Jason Whitehead pipped Ben Borman by 0.4 of a second to jump up to P3. So the Bugatti Bolide of Dan Kirby has absolutely stormed the pace. Let's go with the Valkyrie of Ben Borman, a personal best Sector 1. Using all the curb available by rFactor 2s. Very seemingly restrictive. I mean, it's so easy to get track cuts here. It's not really that restrictive. It's just Spa encourages you to run a little wide on all of these exits. Ben Borman a little down in Sector 2. Not a personal best there, but it's a good Sector 2 time. It's only a 10th off of what Consaz was doing on his last flyer. And he's gonna bail out. It wasn't quite gonna click for Ben Borman in the last sector. Dan Kirby is back on track. Let's take a look with our championship protagonist, Walter de Bruyn, with a personal best Sector 1. I don't think he's had really a clean flyer, and that might be why. That might have invalidated that lap as well. But de Bruyn... grab a little look-see. Well, he's thrown in a 201.4, so that would seem to be a legitimate flyer. That's definitely a legitimate flyer. But he is up on his own time in Sector 1, and as one of the championship protagonists, he would be looking to be a little higher up the Hypercar Pro field in the Pagani Imola. The only Pagani again, I believe. It's continuing to be the sort of the dark horse of the hypercar field. However, there's a Valkyrie that's looking very pacey behind him, and de Bruyn's actually going to peel off to not impede Jason. I believe that was Jason Whitehead's flying lap. Matthew Overton slots into 9th. Getting into the top 10, let's go with that flying Valkyrie. Was actually on an outlap. And we're running down. Now, if that is an outlap, I'm looking at where timing is right now. He might be the last one to set a lap in the entire session. We've sort of stayed still on timing for the moment. There's times being set. However, as I say that, Dan Kirby once again with a purple sector. Just a hair off in Sector 1, just a hair on in Sector 2. Dan Kirby is matching his own pace, which is an absolutely storming pace. To be over a second of the entire hypercar field. And he goes even faster by a couple tenths of a second to a 58.1. Was on the cusp of even breaking into the 57s before anyone else has even broken into the 58s. John Uyen goes second at the last second with a 59.4, still not even hitting the 58s of Dan Kirby, who is stomping at Gilles Lalonde. 202.3, gets a decent flyer in at the last second, will slot into 11th. And let's see... Jerry Chen, currently the pace sitter in Hypercar Am, I believe. He's going to be one of the last ones to finish. We also have, looks like, Jason Whitehead on a flyer. And Walter de Bruyn is continuing his flyer. However, I believe the likes of Dan Kirby and John Uyan, their qualifying sessions are done, despite the fact that they're still on track. Jerry Chen will bail out of that lap. Jason Whitehead with a personal best Sector 2, but not a strong first sector. However, to be fair, first sector times are not going to look impressive when you're comparing them solely to Dan Kirby. That's a very twitchy Valkyrie going through the final run there. And he goes 4th. Now, Walter de Bruyn, still on his flyer. Any improvements in sectors? Oh, wait. He's actually... I think I just missed his time. I do not believe he improved because he remains 8th. finishing up laps. Don't think Dan Kirby is on a legitimate flyer, and he's not. So that is pretty much going to be our qualifying order. I had a bit of a heart attack for a moment because I thought I was on mute this whole time. Holy cow, that would have been hilarious. 20 minutes of silent qualifying while I'm yelling to nobody. Absolutely storming laps from the two Bugattis of Dan Kirby, John Uyan, and the Ferrari FXXK Evo of Francisco brings in the qualifying podium, if you will. We have results, so we should look at them. So Dan Kirby sets the pace. The part-time driver for the CMS Pro effort. Well, when he's here, he's fast. Dan Kirby with a 1:58.1, over a second of our championship leader, John Uyan, with a 1:59.4. And the likes of John, Francisco, Jason, and Ben will be thinking, well, that was qualifying, and there is 1 point on offer for getting the pole position, which clearly has been taken by Dan Kirby. However, the race is worth a lot more points, and they'll be looking for strategy and race pace, having a good race car underneath them to try to challenge Dan Kirby's raw speed. So Francisco, P3 in the first of the Ferraris, the first of the Valkyries, Jason Whitehead, teammate Ben Borman, running together. Norm Graff in the alternate Ferrari, our standard Ferrari driver, if you will, brings home P6, and Ross Smith, the highest placing Hypercar AM, pips Jerry Chen by just 0.2 of a second for the Hypercar AM pole, and Walter de Bruyn brings home 7th in Hypercar with the 201.4s. We have a lot of mid 201s, so it was a very, very tight field. Jerry Chen and Matthew Overton round out our top 10, but we have more pages, don't you worry. Gilles Lalonde, the 202.3 in P11. Eric Moyne, one of the championship protagonists in Hypercar AM, the Akiri Mistral with a 202.3. And then a big jump down to the rest of the Hypercar field where you have Jerome Benchke, Brad Nielsen Vestergaard, and Bob Robertson. And I got a special note, and this is a good time to shout it out. Bob Robertson is the oldest guy in the league in Championship Motorsports, and the oldest sim racer that I think most of us know at 84 years old. Bob Robertson in the Hypercar AM class, 84 years old, and that is just fantastic to see. Some of the things that come with old age have attributed to a little bit of a pace loss compared to the good old days, but it is awesome to see Bob Robertson back in the grid, back on the grid, and back in the seat. So that's fantastic. All right, moving to the GTs. We have Brandon Gant setting the pace overall and in GT Pro with a 2:16.8, the only one of the GTs to get into the 2:16s, with Tom Lane and Roland Hagenars and Jamie Zalecki with just a 10th splitting them for our GT AM top 3, with George Angelidis second in the GT Pros, back at a 2:17.6. Again, there's more pages. Manuel Stoll with a very colorful Porsche. He's going to go next to Vinicius Gonzalez, Dean Sheesby, John Mayer, Luca Viani, Filippo Marazzi, Matt Boyce, followed by Craig Dans, Peter Mayer, and Stephen Miller, bringing up the 30th position on the grid. There are borderline too many cars here at the event. 37 cars on track. Now, Spa's a big place, and that's where you'd be okay with a high amount of cars. However, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pit boxes on the track layout that we're using, so pretty much everybody would be expecting to be sharing pit boxes, so the pit box check in a little bit will be, I think, very entertaining. It's an absolute traffic jam. Barry DiMazzo brings home 31st, followed by Eugene Mazur, James Bowders, Mike Boyce, Ed Jones, and then Tom Nacella. It doesn't look like he got a clean flyer and Ernest Bonaldo, potentially serving a penalty, did not qualify in the Bugatti, so he will shuffle through the GT field as the race begins and get onto the back of the Hypercar field. So, with all that being said, let's take a look at strategy. Let's take a look at tires. Let me bring up the timing board. The driver's briefing will be going on right now, so we have about 5 minutes. Apologies, bear with me for one moment. All right, so the 1 hour of Spa is, of course, the event that you're watching right now, April 23rd, 1 hour of Spa back in the Hypercars. And then we're going to have a double header in May for the 91s with the 230 kilometers of Monza, followed by the big one in the 91 series, the 2.4 hours of Le Mans, May 21st. Then a pretty big gap is going to be to our 4.8 hours of Le Mans for the Hypercar pinnacle race of the season, where all the extra points are on offer, June 18th for the 4.8 hours of Le Mans. And that will be a 2-driver event. So people will need to team up and pair up. And I saw an interesting message earlier that you can do the race alone, but you need to give yourself a drive-through penalty for not having a teammate, which I thought was interesting. Definitely advantages in more ways than one to having a teammate, but that might be because of the driver swap time that takes place. Assuming that the driver swap does not happen at the same time as fuel and tires, it would add, it's like about a minute in rFactor 2 to change drivers, so that's probably accounting for why someone would need to take a drive-through if they're not having a teammate. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, talking about Le Mans quite yet. We still have Spa, Monza, and the 91 Le Mans to go through as well. Now, our championship picture, coming off a win on the last round, John is sitting at 72 points, has taken the championship lead from Walter de Bruyn, has qualified second today, and looks in place to have a good run and extend it. Walter de Bruyn, our 2-time winner in the Pagani, didn't have as high of a qualifying as he would have hoped today, but nevertheless, still a strong contender. Big gap down to Miguel Ramos in third, who I don't believe is in attendance today. And I believe we have a note about Miguel Ramos, that he had an arm injury, and he's going to be out for 5 weeks, which includes missing this round, and that's why he wasn't at the last round as well. So with an injury, Miguel Ramos unable to take part. Dan Kirby, again, as a part-time driver, he had the win in Daytona, a fantastic win, and he's brought home a pole position here, followed by Jason Whitehead, Brian Hall, and Ben Borman, who are the Valkyrie, Lamborghini, and Valkyrie drivers, respectively. And then Ernest Bonaldo, again, a CMS Pro driver, followed by Norm Graff and Gilles Lalonde. So our big players are all here, minus Miguel Ramos. In the Hypercar AMS, Jerry Chen leads the way, qualified second today behind Ross Smith, who sits down in fourth. Now, Jerry Chen is a 2-time winner, following, I believe, just the most recent 2 races as well. So Jerry Chen has taken control of the championship standings, along with his Flying Kiwi Racing teammate, all right, sorry, I was just reading a note. The pitbox check might be a little bit delayed, and then the session will be restarted. I'm assuming the driver briefing might have gone a little bit extra. Anyway, Flying Kiwi Racing does take the lead with that as well, with Jerry Chen and Matthew Overton bringing in 75 and 30 points respectively. And Moyne is back on the grid today. He'll be looking to resume his championship campaign. Wayne Hutchinson, again, absent. That is really going to be impacting where he stands in said standings. Cameron Barker still leads the way in the GTs, Hanging on by a thread, though, because it's just a 2-point spread between George Angelidis and back to Ahmed Abdallah in third. The HPDs lead the way in the team's championship with George Angelidis and John Mayer, respectively, fighting the SMR Corkscrew Motorsports Mustangs of Cameron Sansano and Vasilis Kacherdinkes, both of which didn't have the best Long Beach event that they would have hoped for, and it's dropped their team a little ways back off the HPDs, but nevertheless, a very tight GT Pro battle is raging. Now, you want to talk about a tight battle raging? The GT AMs are tied up still. I think they were tied up going into the last race, and with the drop around and however the math works out, we're still tied up between Tom Lane, 2 wins, and Matt Boyce, 2 wins. Absolutely together the whole way, and this GT AM battle is going to continue to be potentially one of the most entertaining in the entire grid. It doesn't matter that they're the AM category of the slower category of cars, they still give us a fantastic championship picture. All right, let's talk strategy for a little bit. The Hypercars, of course, only have the slick tires. The wets will not be needed today. Hypercar strategy is somewhat straightforward, although very tight. So obviously with a 1-hour race, we are going to need a stop with the 2x fuel. However, the Hypercars can't really run at full power for an hour and not need a splash at the end. So there will be some fuel saving, turning the engine down potentially to try to get those Hypercars to the end on only a single stop. Realistically, the slick tires should be double stinted through that time on, the just 1x tire wear, so that's 1 hour around Spa. Realistically, that would be the quicker way to keep it, but if you're burning them up or what have you, you may need to take your stop. It's 25 seconds for tires, so if you can preserve them, only need 1 stop and no splash at the end, that is going to be the quickest way around. Just double check on timing that I'm not going to miss the start of the race or anything. Nope, we are good. So, for the GT side, I've been armed with what the kids call information. So, the GTs are not going to have this sort of fuel-saving mode from lap 1 that the Hypercars might be running into. It'll be relatively easy for them to grab a 1-stop on pit strategy. And then tires is the question. Looks like the predominant strategies could be soft and soft. So running the softest tires, taking soft tires at the stop, which is I believe, 12-second tire change for the GTs. It's actually a big difference between a GT tire stop and a Hypercar tire stop. The GTs could stop, take the softs off the car, put a new pair of softs on the car, and then take that new pair of softs back off and put a third pair of softs on, and they would still have a faster tire change than the Hypercars. So taking tires in GT is nowhere near as punishing, and going soft makes a lot of sense to get the most out of it. Can you make up 12 seconds by always being on the softest rubber and getting a new set of it, a new pair of boots halfway through the race? Most likely, with some of the pace that we see. Now there's some alternate strategies, which is you would run the softs but not take a second pair, so you'd save 10 seconds or 12 seconds in the middle of the race by not needing to take tires. You'd still need the fuel, obviously, and then there's the chance that you could do the same but on the mediums instead. So that's potentially a little bit slower, but it could be the safer in terms of making sure you always have tires underneath you. They won't be the grippiest, but they will be there. Now, I believe, we are going into a second warm-up session. I thought I was really delaying and pulling these. Wait a minute. I had a track map graphic somewhere. But when I said the words, no track map popped up. It should look something like that. So, down into turn 1, we have our orange zone that runs all the way through turn 1, through Eau Rouge, down the Kemmel Straight. That is where incidents will be viewed with more scrutiny compared to the rest of the race, and they will be automatically reviewed after the race. So the La Source hairpin, very, very important to get that right as you dive down to Eau Rouge. It's a tricky run through Eau Rouge, obviously, and then into the Kemmel Straight where it's absolutely flat out all the way to Lacombe. 5, 6, 7 complex, down to the turn 8 hairpin, left-hand flick through No Name, and then Pouon, the 10, 11 apexes. Double apex, very tricky corner, and so easy to run wide there as well and pick up some track cut warnings. As those pile up, you will get automatic drive-through penalties, so penalties could be a factor in this race for sure. Through the 12, 13, 14 complex, it's a lot of mid-speed sweeping corners. And then the 15 run, kick off as fast as you can as you're going to run through Blanchimont, through the turn 17 kink, and then dive down to the chicane to round out the lap. It's a tricky place. It's a long place. It's got a little bit of everything. Spa is always a fan favorite and a driver favorite, so I'm looking forward to having a good race here today. Now watch this transition. You ready? Boop, it's just gone. Hey, there we go. There's a pit box check. That's what a pit box check looks like, and that's why we do it. Those two cars will know that they are sharing a pit box now. And yeah, you can see how busy the pit lane is when we're doing this pit box check, as everyone's trying to figure out who they're sharing with, if they're sharing. And like I said, as we go 4 wide in the pit lane, it's busy. And this is the thing is, like when there's, for the hypercars especially, if you're one-stopping, there's a lap where everybody is going to pit pretty much. So if hypercars are sharing, you know, that's going to be obviously a good thing to know. But if you're sharing hypercar to GT, it's a little less concerning. Pit stop times are going to be different. When you take your stop is going to be different. So yeah, it's not as concerning to share with a GT car if you're in the hypercars, but you still want to know. Even though, again, if you're on the hypercars and you're running the one-stop save fuel strategy, there's not really a lot of option you have when you stop. Like, there's going to be a lap where you have to stop if you want to get the most out of your fuel tank and then make it to the end without a splash. Yeah, this is kind of what it looks like. So, and what you can do is, I guess, stack side by side, and technically both get service. So, I mean, it'd be a little bit 200 IQ to be deciding who's going to be on what side in case you stacked or whatever, because realistically, you don't want to be, imagine you're Brandon Gant on the right there, and you're, you're stuck. Look at it, he's got to reverse out and try to... You know, so you don't want to be the one between the wall and a competitor, especially if there's cars parked ahead of you in the pit stop. Or I'm sorry, that's not Brandon Gant. That is a Bentley. But, you know, this is why we do it, and you want to be probably on... It's kind of like airplanes. You want to be on the aisle seat so that you can get out without getting stuck. I don't know why it looks very entertaining to see it from this angle. I've been doing pit box checks myself, obviously, as part of the NARS Championship, but there's something about seeing it from this angle that is just more amusing. Gotta say, though, Francisco pulled in P3, and he's actually a returning driver after a year hiatus. I'm also well-versed in hiatuses, so... I mean, to come back and be right on pace, P3 in the Ferrari, that's awesome. Francisco, a very strong driver, and yeah, he loves Ferraris, and he's back in it, so fantastic to see Francisco back. Welcome back to the championship. And speaking of Ferraris, yeah, our last year's season champion, Norm Graff, took the championship from Jason Whitehead last season. Despite always being an independent entry, there's some of these that I would really like to see, a couple of these drivers team up a little bit and have stronger team presences. For example, Francisco is now in the Ferrari, Norm Graf is in the Ferrari, not to play matchmaker, but what if you put those two drivers together? Even if they never talk to each other or collaborate, they'd still be in the running in a teams championship, which you don't get as an independent. It's just more. But as I said, Miguel Ramos is out with an injury. And Walter de Bruyn not having the best qualifying that he would have hoped for, but he is the back-to-back winner so far. So we know Walter de Bruyn is going to be quick and going to be a factor in this race. Put a bit of a spotlight on Ross Smith, who's last year's champion. He's got a new team with Guillaume Benchka. Team is competing for the team championship, of course, and Ross Smith is going to be fighting and in the running for the Hypercar AM Drivers' Championship. Returning champion Ross Smith, so you want to make sure that you can defend your honor quite well the next season. With their new team, which is the Storm Rider Racing and the Noon Racing. The Aston Martin Valkyrie collaborations continue across Ross Smith, Jimmy Benchka, and then, of course, Jason Whitehead and Ben Borman. So, good to them. And I did want to call out Jerry Chen as well, who is typically a GT driver for many, many years, a GT driver. However, Jerry Chen, as let's throw the driver box up there to get some lower thirds. Jerry Chen is moving up to the Hypercars after years and years and years as a GT driver. So whether that's a GT only or GT and multi-class, he's now going to be in the the prototype or the Hypercar, the upperclassman of a multi-class race. So I didn't actually know that about Jerry Chen, and I'm competing with him on the Thursday series. So yeah, it's super cool. Joining the breaking out of the mold of always being a consistent GT runner. Any other fun facts? Ooh, I have a fun fact. I found this out yesterday. So I was looking at how Live Racers is tracking data. Where is that? I saved it somewhere. One second. I have a fun fact. The CMS rFactor 2 driver with the most race time in ranked rFactor 2 sessions is John Uyan with over 18 days of race time, which is over 432 hours of not just track time, of race time, if I'm not mistaken. And then next up is Jason Whitehead with 14 days of race time, and then followed by Norm Graf with 11 days of race time. Is that random? Yes. But I thought that was very interesting because in the Live Racer stats, it sort of shows who's got the most race time and race experience. So then, sorted by that amount, and John with 18 days of race time, followed by Jason Whitehead with 14 days of race time. Very, very, very experienced drivers, obviously. All right, what else for fun facts? I realized that we're missing Vasilis Katrininkis, which is going to have an impact on the Mustang's ability with the SMR Corkscrew Motorsports to continue their run in the Teams Championship. So could be looking at a good haul of points for the HPD team. I think now we're going to be starting the race session. Any other fun facts? John Mayer last year, who is currently teaming with George Angelidis in said Acura NSX, was actually a GT AM driver last year. and has moved up to join George, and they're currently leading. So good job, John Mayer and George Angelides, leading the team's championship. Update on Tom Nacella. The reason he's out is he had an arm surgery that put him out for 5 weeks. So we got a couple of arm injuries. Miguel Ramos, I believe, and Tom Nacella. Something going on with CMS drivers and arm injuries. Both missing this round and the previous round. And then, of course, one of our favorites here, Tom Lane. Back-to-back wins in GT. And yeah, absolutely crazy battle going on between Matt Boyce in the championship. And as we look at it there with the Trash Panda Racing Lamborghini Huracans, the Boyce brothers were teams champions last year, and trying to go for it again this year in the Huracans with Matt Boyce competing against Tom Lane for the overall championship. All right, as we can all see, it's time to go trackside on our leaders as they go up through Eau Rouge. This is going to be our pace lap. And on Thursday, it literally took exactly 4 minutes to get around. So we should have exactly an hour of racing when it all goes green. So a big thank you to all the viewers and people for hanging out in the stream. Apologies for a lack of Jake Sanson. Just me this time. We're Sansonless. That's a beautiful shot. I love the depth of field effects that have been added to rFactor 2 in the last few years with the post-processing and stuff like that. It really brings it to life when there's shots like that and the cars sort of blur out into the background. So this will be interesting. Dan Kirby obviously had a fantastic qualifying car. How good of a race car does Dan Kirby have? So John's coming off a win on the Thursday series with this car, so he'll obviously know his strategy. Go down to our other pole sitter, Ross Smith. Trying to build a little bit of heat in that tire. In the Valkyrie, Jason Whitehead takes evasive action through the pace lap. It's kind of what I do as well, but look, Jason Whitehead is just kind of hanging off to the side. I don't like following the guy immediately behind, just because if there's an issue or something, I like being able to see a little bit further ahead. So yeah, I do the Jason Whitehead as well, where you're kind of just off, a couple car widths to the left or right, just so that I can kind of see ahead, and if the guy in front checks up, it's not a sure shot that I run to the back of me, or I'm already offline. And then Brandon Gant is leading our GT field in the GTR. Flames kicking out of the side. Right behind him is going to be Tom Lane in the Mustang, tied for the championship. And what I'm just realizing now, what would be a very disappointing qualifying for Matt Boyce, who is down 4, 5, 6, 7th in GT AM. Way down in the pack in the Trash Panda Racing. So not a good qualifying session for him as he wants to contend with Tom Lane. Tom Lane took the pole in GT AM. So Matt Boyce, not as strong of a start as he would have liked. And the GTs are right on the back of the Hypercars as well. All right, rounding the the chicane. We're going to cross the line and step on it. John is not letting Kirby have any advantage. Bit of a confusion there if it was the timing line or the starting grid line. But we are away. The Bugatti is leading 1 and 2. Step back to Francisco in third. Through Eau Rouge. rFactor struggling to keep up with how many cars we have here. 30 plus cars. As we go. Green in the GTs. A couple Hypercars had to get out of the way there and get through them through Eau Rouge. Not what Brandon Gant or Tom Williams would have wanted to see on lap 1. There's already plenty happening. Niels Investigard all over the back of Ernest Bonaldo. Let's get that battle box up. That's what we like to see. These guys going at it for 12th. Absolutely stockpiled GT field, as you would expect, down into the braking off the Kemmel Straight for the first time. Gonzalez all over the back of Manuel Stoll in the Porsche. And moving up the order a little bit, Norm Graff trying to have a look at Ben Borman, who's dropped back a little bit from Jason Whitehead. Dan Kirby with about a second lead, as we have a Aston Martin of Dean Sheesby has had a rough go of it at the end of Kemmel. What happened here? Oh, he's already kind of alone. It's just, yeah, not hooked up right now. Is Dean Sheesby. And that is pretty much all she wrote from an incident standpoint. We had a very, very clean opening lap, which is what we love to see, obviously. Sorry, just juggling 12 things here. No matter. Yomi Benchka is going to get around Robertson into the chicane. Uyan will set the fastest time despite being a second behind Kirby, so race pace could be there in the second place Bugatti right now. Zalecki has a look. My brain paused there for a second. Sorry about that. Roland Hagenars through the chicane. And there's so many here. This is the GT AMS. Mixing it up as we go. Jason Whitehead gets through Francisco at the end of the Kemmel Straight. And Niels Investigard has already picked up a penalty. And that could be for speeding in the pit lane as he went into the pits, came out, and immediately got a penalty. Norm Graff trying to do the same as Francisco did on Jason Whitehead ahead. The Ferraris and the Valkyries battling over 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, while the Bugattis take the pace a little bit up the road. Manuel Stoll having a look at George Angelidis. Couldn't quite get the job done. And he's got a very racy Vinicius right behind him as well. The huge battle in the GTs there, it's all kicking off. Ernest Bonaldo, has he had a little bit of insight? I think he was a little bit higher up, wasn't he? He's now looking at the back of Gilles Lalonde. As Matt Boyce has a look at Eric Moyne. Wait a minute, Moyne's in the Hypercars. So something's happened to Moyne and he dropped back a little bit. Dean Sheesby has hit the lane and come back out. John Mayer also contending with Eric Moyne going through. GTs start to shuffle along. Ernest Bonaldo has gotten back around. Gilles Lalonde is now looking at the back of Matthew Overton and will follow them through Eau Rouge. Still 7/10 of a second at the lead between Kirby and Uyan. They're on the Kemmel Straight now, so that time will start to shrink a little bit, but as will this time here. Bernaldo and Overton, 3/10 of a second going on to Kemmel. Bernaldo having a look to the inside, can't quite do it. to get the car to the end of the race on a single stop. The Bugattis are one of the ones that do have to turn their engine down quite a bit. And it will impact things, as Hagenars was trying to have a look at Zalecki, spun up the tires, and it's going to let Angelitas through while Eric Moyne goes past both of them as the Hypercar continues their recovery drive. Angelitas grabs the spot. Roland Hagenars all sorts of loose through Eau Rouge, as the Hypercar ahead kind of checked up George on his entry, and that's given the Porsche behind of Manuel Stoll a huge run down Kemmel, and he'll get the job done easy. So Hagenars has really lost out here. And the Corvette is gonna have to put the paces on to get those spots back. We have another battle forming here on the back straight. De Bruyn looking around the outside of Smith potentially through the kink, is not going to have enough to go down the inside as Jerry Chen contends with GT traffic behind. They cross the line. It's all nice and clear. Now, Bonaldo still looking at the back of Overton. He's going to have a look down into T1. He was just barely not close enough to stick the nose in. And they're going to go side by side down to Eau Rouge potentially. Overton wants to take the wall line back, and he does so. Bernardo potentially had to lift just slightly to let him go. Overton and Bernardo onto the Kemmel straight. And likewise ahead, De Bruyn still not able to get through on Ross Smith, but Bernardo does get through on Matthew Overton, but cooks it into the braking zone at the end of Kemmel. Overton will get back around. Speaking of runs after straights, Hagenars, Gonzalez, Marazzi, all over the back of one another. This ridiculous battle of all these GT cars stacked up continues down into turn one. It's an absolutely giant train of cars coming into turn one here. Marazzi in the Ferrari is all over the back of Gonzalez. The battle box can't even pick it up because there's so many cars near each other, going all the way up to Jamie Zalecki, with John Mayer and Matt Boyce even behind these guys. So we've got about 7 GTs. Line to stern, we have Lots Marazzi in the middle of it. He recovers. Nicely done, Felipe Marazzi, but the likes of Craig Dans is now going to be having a look at him as well as they go side by side. Craig Dans does have the momentum to make it stick. Now, Bernardo still trying to get around Overton, and Tom Lane is now looking at the back of Zalecki and is looking very, very racy. Dan Kirby sets the fastest lap of the race at a 2-minute dead. Starting to gap Uyan a little bit, as Tom Lane gets very squirrely over the curbs. Almost chucked it away there in No Name. Ernest Bonaldo and Matthew Overton. Bonaldo is going to make the move. Finally done 2 laps in. However, De Bruyn is still trying to get around Ross Smith. Five tenths down the straight. It's not getting closer either. However, a gap that is getting closer is Overton potentially looking at the back of Bernardo again. No, he's not going to have enough to make it work. Nielsen Vestager is coming back through the line as John Mayer is looking at the back of Matt Boyce. Hypercar traffic trying to come through the kink. The Hypercar backs off a little bit, gives Boyce the full run despite having to look in his mirrors. As Bernardo has already caught up to Jerry Chen. Bernardo on a bit of a recovery drive here, it would seem like. Let's go back on board with the Corvette of Hagenars, looking at the back of Gonzalez with Stoll behind, or Stoll ahead, sorry. As that Hypercar continues to sort of create gaps in between these guys, he's trying to get through as cleanly as possible, obviously. There's a Lamborghini behind him. That's Matt Boyce right behind. Again, Matt Boyce a little bit tail whippy out of Eau Rouge, and he's trying to get through the field to kind of, reduce the deficit he has to Tom Lane, which is quite severe right now. Multiple positions deficit as Nielsen Vestager continues to recover through the field. Ernest Bonaldo has gotten through Jerry Chen. How did it happen? It happened potentially into the chicane. Jerry Chen not defending it too hard. Bernaldo was a bit faster through the kink. And Bernaldo through. Nicely done. Bernaldo's gotten through the 2 Flying Kiwi races. We're now in a bit of a moment with each other as Overton on the back of his teammate down the straight. How hard is Jerry Chen gonna fight this? Not too hard, but he has the full braking line. And Overton follows through. Overton absolutely in the thick of it at the beginning of this race. Walter De Bruyn still can't get by Ross Smith as they start negotiating GT traffic. Speaking of which, GT off on the side, just getting out of the way there was the Mustang. Bernaldo is catching on these guys. Ernest Bernaldo is absolutely flying in the Bugatti. De Bruyn tries to have a look around the outside of Smith. It's not going to happen there. A little bit up the road, Ben Borman has caught Norm Graff. Ben Borman trying to have a draft into the chicane is not going to be close enough to do it. De Bruyn and Smith just behind. Contend with GT traffic. De Bruyn gets through that GT traffic to follow Ross Smith through. Ross Smith is not safe. Hasn't been safe for a few laps. Still isn't safe. Only the front brake discs glowing on that Pagani. And typically when you see a Bugatti go through a corner like that, all 4 brake discs would be glowing red hot. As there's some GT interference to Ross Smith's exit of Eau Rouge, and De Bruyn will finally get around the Aston Martin Valkyrie. And Ernest Bernaldo might be trying to follow him as he weaves around a GT car into the inside of the Valkyrie. Ernest Bernaldo follows suit. Now Bernaldo will be looking ahead to De Bruyn. Ross Smith losing a couple positions, albeit not in class. Smith still continues to lead the GT AM field. And now his only competitor on track, though, neck behind him, is Jerry Chen. So the middlemen have all been cycled through as Bernaldo contends with a GT car coming out of no name. We'll look to the inside of Eugene Mazur. We'll get it done nice and easy, and that's going to put a bit of a gap and some safety net between him and Smith if there was any chance of Smith having a run back. And Smith not that far ahead of Jerry Chen, only 1.6 seconds. The Hypercar lead could be under threat. And there's been a bit of a battle here right towards the lower midfield, or quite the back of the field in terms of the GTs, as Matthew Overton trying to take advantage of Chen getting stuck in traffic. Overton might have had a better run here. Not going to be close enough to do anything about it in the chicane, as Gilles Lalonde clears lap traffic behind as well. But James Bowders and Mike Boyce have been absolutely going at it as Bowders tries to go around the outside of the Lamborghini into the final braking zone. Boyce doesn't want to give it up easy. They're going to go side by side. Almost an up and under done by Boyce, but Bowders parks it on the apex. And Boyce is going to have the run into Tier 1. Now, Manuel Stoll is... Oops, what's happened here with Ernest Bonaldo as he dropped back a little bit as he gets around the outside of Ross Smith. Felipe Marazzi has also spun. He was in the thick of it in the GTs. And Norm Graf has caught up to his fellow Ferrari competitor for 4th and 5th overall. Borman and De Bruyn not far behind. Norm Graf is absolutely hustling Francesco. Francesco is needing to be the one to contend with the GT traffic first. Graf is able to keep the pedal in it a little bit longer and just keep catching up to the back of him. In a moment like this as well, the GT car gets out of the way for Francesco. That means he's already out of the way for Norm Graf. By the time Graf gets there, Borman's going to get stuck behind that said GT car though. Vinicius to the inside of the Corvette. Norm Graf will have a little bit of a better run through there as well. Borman's dropped back almost a second because of that altercation, near altercation with the GT car. For the first time, we have a Ferrari versus Ferrari battle in Hypercar. They're looking to the inside of George Angelidis and Tom Lane. Francisco's going to get through. Norm will not. This has allowed Ben Borman to catch right back up. The Valkyrie to the outside of Angelidis. Angelidis is going to take the line back now. Tom Lane is going to have a Ferrari to the inside of him in turn 1. The Ferrari goes over. That'll be a cut track warning. You don't get many of them, and Norm Graf just used one. Through Eau Rouge. Borman absolutely closer to Graf now than Graf is to Francesco. But if we look a little bit back, that whole shabazzle has given George Angelidis a good run on Tom Lane, who defends the inside, and Angelidis is going to outbreak him around the outside. As Brandon Gant and Jamie Zalecki continue to lead the classes just up the road, Angelidis and Lane are second in their respective classes as Ross Smith gets to the inside of Tom Lane. We'll have to wait an extra corner. However, if we go back here, we have, Boyce and Bowders, but Boyce loses it through Eau Rouge. That's going to put an end to that battle. James Bowders is going to take the place due to death by Eau Rouge for Mike Boyce. Whew, and I think we've finally gotten a little bit of breathing room. We'll hang with Ben Borman for a minute. What an opening 20 minutes. There was never a gap there. And I believe Matt Boyce may have made a little bit of an error. And this has given John Mayer the closest gap on track right now. However, as I say that, Tom Lane is starting to pace George Angelidis through Sector 2, looking at the chicane at the final turn of the track. They're both of them tail whipping as they come off the corner, trying to get as much power down as early as possible. There's a hypercar of Gilles Lalonde, I believe, is going to be coming through. And here we go. Ernest Bonaldo is looking at the back of Walter De Bruyn. We'll split De Bruyn and the GT car of Brandon Gant. That was our GT leader. Bonaldo to the inside at the end of Kemmel will make the move stick. So De Bruyn, I believe, got a little bit checked up by the GT car through turns 1 and 2. And this has allowed Bernaldo through. Bernaldo's recovery drive continues. He started this little sequence back in 11th or so, and he's climbed up to 7th, and he's had to work for it. And this takes points away critically from De Bruyn. So despite the fact that Bernaldo's running his own race, he's provisionally taking points away from De Bruyn that De Bruyn would be using to get to the back of Bernaldo's teammate Uyan in the championship lead. Kirby, by the way, continues to lead by over 5 seconds. His qualifying pace was no fluke as Gonzalez all over the back of Manuel Stoll in the Porsche, and better run for the Corvette to the inside. There's going to be the double apex left coming up, and he won't have enough. There's not a heavy braking zone here to throw it down the inside, so you need more overlap. He knows that, and he backs out a little bit. And Danz has got a penalty. This is what I was talking about. It is very easy to get a penalty. And Craig Danz... Oh, I'm sorry. Craig Danz potentially was having some other issues. So that I was thinking Gant. I thought Brandon Gant was the one who got a penalty. I got the names confused. Sorry, apologies for that. We continue with Gonzalez and Stoll. We just take a look down timing and scoring and see what has happened in the past 20 minutes. I don't even know. Dan Kirby continues to lead. Jason Whitehead only 2 seconds behind John Uyan in third. And Uyan will be on the one stop. If Kirby's also on the one stop, then Dan Kirby has had an absolutely storming performance. If Dan Kirby is doing the splash at the end, however, to get that extra pace, this is going to be a much different outlook come the end of the race. Jerry Chen was having an idea around the outside of Ross Smith. Matthew Overton continues to follow his teammate. And these are the top 3. This is the entire podium on screen for Hypercar AM. On the flip side of the track, however, the GT gaggle, I can't even quite tell who's in that. Stoll trying to go keep it around the outside of Boyce. Boyce does get through. There's a potential that maybe Stoll made a mistake and dropped a few positions. I was trying to defend back as Overton is still on the back of his teammate. Can't quite make it stick, but they're going to move on to the back straight now. If Overton's trying to have a move on his teammate, or if he's trying to let Jerry Chen be the aggressor on Ross Smith ahead and potentially pick up the pieces. As these guys space out a little bit, let's go back to Boyce, Stoll, and Mayer. The 4 of these guys continue to chase Vinicius Gonçalves. As I say that, Overton creates... Oh, it was into the braking zone. They flipped for a second. I think it was probably just a timing glitch that I saw. I thought he did make a move or something. But no, we'll go back to John Mayer and Manuel Stoll, still following Gonçalves and Boyce. Hang on a second. Has Borman gotten checked up by traffic, or is Bernaldo just on that much of a flying stint? Bernaldo is now right on the back of Ben Borman. Bugatti versus Valkyrie. It's sort of the story of the top 7. Mixing in the 2 Ferraris of Francesco and Graf. Manuel Stoll, Vinicius Gonçalves, Boyce, followed by Mayer. The 4 of these guys continue to battle it out, and let's get some clarity on exactly which positions in class are we talking about here. These are podium spots in AM. Okay, this is Gonçalves and Mayer are 3rd in Pro. Oh, and Stoll has a little bit of a spin at the end of Kimmel. And that's gonna put the battle off to the races in terms of Stoll's position. That's potentially even tightened up Boyce and Gonçalves more. They spaced out a little bit, but Stoll just trying to hang it around the outside, couldn't quite do it. And Bernaldo is now well and truly on the back of Ben Borman. and they're only 1.8 seconds off the back of Graf, who has now dropped back a couple seconds of his own. Back to Francisco, the returning driver, is looking good for a P4 finish. So how much of a draft can Bernaldo pull through Kemmel? Borman's already going defensive and looking to the inside of one of the Lambos as Gilmabenchka picks up a penalty. Norm Graf has actually closed up to the back of Francisco. Francisco potentially having to contend with traffic or made a little bit of an error. We've got these two guys for 4th and the two guys right behind them on track for 6th. So here we go, the Ferraris through GT traffic. Graf has a little bit more momentum coming up, but it's not enough to do anything about it. He'll just need to follow through, potentially be looking at the back. Now if we skip back just a second here, Borman's gotten checked up by the GT! Massively checked up by the GT! And this has given Bernaldo big advantage to get through. That's not the place to do it though. Oh, I think Bernaldo, having looked to the inside a little too early, may have scrubbed his entry speed going back onto the straight, which is where you want it for a moment like this. This is why you want that speed, because Graf is now on the back of Francisco. Bernaldo not close enough to do anything about it, just behind. As Norm Graf is trying to look to the outside, they had some overlap, but Francisco doesn't see him. They're both gonna have to let Borman and Bernaldo through. The Ferraris recover right in front of Walter de Bruyn. Let's grab backwards just a little bit if we could. Francisco, I might be getting too late now. I was just trying to see. Yeah, we've missed it by a second. So give me a second. Easier said than done. Here we go. Francisco and Norm Graf collision into turn 1. So Francisco's defensive and he's trying to retake the line, but Graf is already there. Graf was already there, so I'm afraid I would have to put the leading blame towards Francisco. Graf already had significant overlap on that outside line, and Francisco was trying to take it, not realizing he was there. So Graf loses out big time as a result of that. Alright, I was trying to go back to live here. Graf is again right on the back of him. De Bruyn has not let them get away at all. He's taking advantage of their woes down into that turn 1. And De Bruyn wants a piece of it. As into the pits come some of our big hitters. That's Kirby and Uyon, both into the pits at the same time, along with Whitehead. Gonzalez is going to grab the lane as well. This leaves Ben Borman. Oh, he's not still on track. He just has a later pit box. Misses his pit box by a second, though, and that's going to make it very awkward for Ben Borman to begin his service. That's cost him a little bit as well. Uyon's already out. Kirby already down the road. So on the same strategy, as Uyon comes out right behind Overton. Overton and Chen yet to pit. And at some point in all the mayhem, Overton has gotten through on Jerry Chen. So now Uyon won't want to stand behind Overton for too long. There's There's not an opportunity yet. Graf and Smith exit as well. All kicking off. So a similar situation between Graf and Smith as Leon and Overton. They're in their own race in the Hypercar Pros, but they've found themselves behind some Hypercar AMs for legitimate position. Graf on the back straight. This is the more likely of the two situations to get resolved, but it's not. Ross Smith is no slouch in the straight. As we go through traffic, Overton splits the GTs. Uyon has to wait as the GTs go side by side ahead. Uyon's trying to figure out a spot to do it. They're gonna go almost 3 wide. As Jerry Chen tries to go with him, he has to back out. Brendan can't. Had a Hypercar sweeping from 2 car widths on the outside, but it will all work out and Uyon will retain the position. And Dan Kirby is a couple seconds behind Walter de Bruyn, who has yet to make his stop. And as I say that, he has made his stop. Here are some of the ones making their stop. The same as Stoll, who has to reverse and tries to grab a spot next to... Is that Jamie? No, that's not Jamie Selecki, but he can't get into his lane. Manuel Stoll has been absolutely crushed by the joint pit box here, I believe. Guillaume Benchka was taking the full pit box and Stoll had no room. It's going to massively impact our GT battle. As Lalonde joins in, Whitehead exits, or Whitehead was already out, as he's going to be having an exiting Walter de Bruyn right in front of him. So pretty much everybody doing the one-stopper in Hypercar. That is the predominantly better strategy. Conserve that fuel and not have to do an entire another run down pit lane. Which makes Kirby's performance all the more impressive. As we've lost Ben Borman for some reason. Jason Whitehead, though, all over the back of Walter de Bruyn down that pit straight. Something's happened to Ben Borman. I'm looking at the event log. Hold on. I see a thing. Get a gauge on what happened with Ben Borman, potentially. Potentially. Borman was on track and he just loses it. Going on the back straight, and it results in a retirement. I'm not sure why that's resulted in a retirement. For Ben Borman, that's one of our key players that was in that top 5 battle. His teammate, Jason Whitehead, all over the back of Walter de Bruyn, continuing that pursuit. As Norm Graf has still yet to get around Ross Smith. Whitehead to the inside, getting that move done very early. Well before the kink on Walter de Bruyn. Jason Whitehead back into 4th place, and Bernaldo is just ahead there, and that is for position. It is currently a CMS Pro 1-2-3. But Whitehead will be looking to spoil that triple podium for the CMS Pro team. Let's flip back to Norm Graf and Ross Smith and see just what's going on back here. They've been nose to tail for several laps in a row. All 4 brake discs glowing on Norm Graf's car as they dive down to Tier 1. Up Eau Rouge, Graf grabbing a little bit of curb on both sides. Has a tiniest of 4-wheel slides, as is somewhat expected. Smith around the Acura with no issue, and Graf follows suit. Walter de Bruyn, by the way, hasn't really let Whitehead get away. Potentially traffic there of the Bentley may have had a factor, but he's definitely still in there. We switch back to Norm Graf is really starting to hustle. Ross Smith, who gets a little bit of wheel spin, going down into no name. Through the double left. Graf is a little tighter. And he's used that tighter line to get right on the back of Ross Smith. Even, I think, potentially has given him a little bit of a nudge there on exit. Graf is a bit tighter on all of these apexes, and it's giving him more momentum as they come out of the corner. But they have to contend with the GT car of Tom Lane, I believe, ahead. Ross Smith not able to go down the inside of Tom Lane. So how much earlier on the throttle was Norm Graf in there? He was also needing to hang off the throttle, and it hasn't led to much of an advantage. There's going to be nothing into the kink, of course, but he's following very closely. The downforce washes him out, but nothing into the braking zone. GT traffic to contend with into turn one. Ross Smith goes very committed on the inside of the Bentley. Graf wasn't close enough to follow. And this has had a factor. Smith actually really likes this buffer because Jerry Chen, or is that Matthew Overton? Matthew Overton isn't that far behind. Again, knocking on the door of this Hypercar AM win. As Graf, potentially checking something on his dash or something, runs two wheels on the grass. You don't want to do that. Oh, Norm Graf kicks up the tail just a little bit. And that's absolutely going to drop him off the back of Smith and gives Overton potentially a look as well. So Graf, on his own accord, trying to hustle Ross Smith, has made the tiniest of errors, but it's enough. As Stephen Miller and Manuel Stoll go side by side, Stoll gets the move done. Just barely. Porsche's gonna have all the line and then some to pick his way through. Alright, so as a result of all that, we flip back to Norm Graf's situation. Is being caught by Matthew Overton, and not by a small margin. Absolutely put pace on him through Sector 2. Which of course all kicked up by Norm spinning up the tires a little bit, but Overton was starting to close in on Ross Smith, and just in the way happened to be Norm Graf. So now here's going the other way. Sometimes it's a hypercar that's getting stuck behind a hypercar AM. In this case, Overton is going to be trying to get through Norm Graf and continue his pursuit of Ross Smith ahead. We flip back to some GT action. While we have Walter de Bruyn going through, we have Bouders and Marazzi. Just barely enough room for de Bruyn to get through, and Marazzi's going to have a spin. Bouders is going to avoid. Marazzi's going to go off to the side. Brendan Gant's going to be unimpeded as he continues his strong run as well. All kicked off there for Marazzi, just getting a little bit checked up perhaps, with de Bruyn going through into turn one and messed up his concentration or his line through Eau Rouge. Overton well and truly on the back of Graf, and yes, your eyes aren't deceiving you, that's Ross Smith just ahead. Trying to get through another of the Ferraris in the GT, and the Hypercar Ferrari will follow suit. The Hypercar Lamborghini will try to follow suit. We have three different Hypercar manufacturers on screen with a fourth GT Ferrari in the same picture. These guys are 1, 2, 3. Overton and Smith for the Hypercar lead, with Norm Graf caught in the middle. Dean Sheesby has picked up a penalty. He is in the mix of it in GT AM, knocking on the door of a top 5, top 6, so that will put Dean Cheeseby backwards a little bit. Trying to see, just making sure we're not missing anything else. This is well and truly our closest battle on track, let alone the fact that there's 3 of them. Overton is looking really, really racy on Norm Graff. Norm Graff has to defend, and or was he looking to the inside of Ross Smith? Oh, Overton gets a little bit wide. And as he gets back on the power, spins up the tires. Norm Graff free to continue his pursuit of Ross Smith, which Overton was trying to hang with. Again, Overton is trying to get to Ross Smith to take advantage of the Hypercar AM lead. And this GT traffic is going to get very dicey as we go almost three wide. The Mustang gets on the grass a little bit. Hypercars astern all over the track are GTs. That makes up the battle, though, of course. Matt Boyce, by the way, has climbed up to be only a few positions back on Tom Lane. In that GT AM battle that rages on, we need to check in with some of our class leaders to go almost 3 wide into the hairpin. Wait, did I just have I been deceived here? Norm Graff has got through. I completely missed it because I was looking at timing and scoring. Let's drop back here a little bit. Look at that gap. Ross Smith spins up the tires a little bit and end that 3 wide sequence. Norm Graff squeezed through with GT and Ross Smith at the same time. I saw as it was ending and my eyes didn't quite register what I was seeing. A very tight move done by Norm Graff. Wait a minute. I think something happened immediately afterwards, and that's what it was. Eugene Mazur, I believe, getting back on track, has spun out Norm Graff right after he makes an amazing move. He not only loses back to Ross Smith, Matthew Overton gets back through. All right, let's go back to live before I miss anything else. All right, James Bowders has definitely been in the wars back there in GTM, looking at Tom Nacella. Our class leaders are Dan Kirby, continuing to lead by 8 seconds. Ross Smith, as we know, continues to lead in Hypercar AM, just a couple seconds ahead of Matthew Overton for position. Brandon Gant and Jamie Zalecki continue to lead their respective classes. Tom Nacella, though, is going to have a bit of an advantage here into turn 1. No, he's not going to be able to take advantage. Meanwhile, Jason Whitehead has absolutely caught up to the back of Ernest Bonaldo for that 3rd in Hypercar and 3rd overall. This is not done. 1 and 2 may well be sorted with the way that the pacing is turning out. But Whitehead and Bernaldo haven't resolved P3 yet. Whitehead's been catching, Bernaldo's stuck in traffic, and potentially that plays into a factor of how he's been able to catch up. Whitehead tries to go around the outside of the GT car. He does seem like he's actually had a little bit of better run through the stint. I'm just trying to get a gauge on lap times. On average, he's a few tenths a lap faster right now than Bernaldo. And this is going to have a factor. Not to mention, he'll be able to have the draft through Kemmel, and he's had some stronger Sector 2s. Oh, he gets all sorts of loose coming off the chicane, though. So that advantage he clawed back. He loses about 6/10 of it just on the home straight. Quick swap over here to Boyce and Mazur side by side into turn 1, and Boyce will get the move done on the Porsche. Back to, where'd they go though? Jason Whitehead 8/10 back, so he's gotten 2/10, 3/10 back through Kemmel. We've had a retirement from Stephen Miller. Norm Graff has caught back up to Matthew Overton in traffic through Eau Rouge. Norm Graff now trying to reclaim that spot on Matthew Overton, who is really trying to keep him behind him because he's finally looking to be nose to tail with Ross Smith for the overall lead in Hypercar AM. Back to Jason Whitehead though, 6/10 of a second. As we're going to be looking at the back straight, or sorry, a couple more corners to go, and then we'll be looking at the back straight. Whitehead a bit tidier through that section. Whitehead has put the pace on through these last few corners, gaining several tenths of a second advantage with a good exit here. You could be looking good. Bernaldo's exit was no slouch though. But Whitehead is in the draft, and it's a strong draft with how close he is. Handles the downforce washout extremely well, looks to the outside, Bernaldo covers, then slowly retakes the line. Whitehead wants a cleaner exit than last time around, and he gets it, but Bernaldo's exit on that torque split of the Bugatti is just stronger coming out of that chicane. Why do I want to call it a hairpin constantly? This is the hairpin. And Whitehead onto the high curb isn't going to help his exit at all. Switching back a little bit, these guys continue. Norm Graff trying to have a look. Does he go split a GT and a Hypercar into the chicane? He doesn't. But there is an absolute army of GT cars ahead of these guys. Ross Smith hasn't got through them as cleanly as he would have liked either, because maybe he's now only a second ahead. There's Ross Smith, stage left. Norm Graff is absolutely going to be hoping and praying he can get through this GT car of Eugene Resor, and he does. Ross Smith is right there. This is for the Hypercar AM lead. Ross Smith hasn't had a good run through Eau Rouge. Matthew Overton into the lead of the Hypercar class. Down the Kemmel straight, and it's all finally played out for Matthew Overton. He gets a little bit onto the rumble strips though. If he keeps it together, Ross Smith looks to be a little bit off the pace through this first sector. Norm Graff is looking to the inside, and he might get it done. Smith has had an atrocious start to this lap, and with only 12 minutes to go, the lead has swapped in favor of Matt Overton. Matthew Overton takes the lead in Hypercar AM after 45 plus minutes of chasing down both Jerry Chen and then Ross Smith. And we might be on for a new winner in Hypercar AM with Matt Overton. Now, what else do we have going on? There's been some... That gaggle of GT cars that we saw was this event of Bowders Sheesby with Tom Nacella, I believe, following in behind. He's a little bit down, and there's a different GT car in the mix. There's so many cars on track. Hang on now. Norm Graff is still trying to pluck his way through these guys, and if Norm Graff battles with Matthew Overton, it's going to give the advantage back towards Smith, who now has a little bit of clear track around them and lets the other two guys be the one to contend with traffic for once. Nice and clean on the dive to Eau Rouge. Ross Smith is going to get around the BMW as well, so he'll continue his run. Not impeded, which would have really set him backwards. Trying to hang on the back of Graff and Smith. I wonder if Smith has realized he might be low on fuel or something, as now needs to back out. And Norm Graff gets a little bit wide at the exit of Kemmel. This is going to give Overton some breathing room. 10 minutes to go. Kirby continues to lead. 13 seconds over Bernaldo. Whitehead has dropped back. Tom Nacella picks up a penalty towards the middle of the GTM field. That could give Dean Sheesby and Felipe Marazzi a chance to make up a spot. And Nacella did that going off track, so that would have been a cut track penalty. If you keep running wide on some of the exits of these corners, you will continue to pick up little cut tracks here and there just for going wide. And they add up. Alright, the Overton-Graf-Smith battle continues to be our closest on track and continues to be the most intriguing because there's a class win at stake here with what's going on between 2.4 seconds for the three cars. And the Hypercar AM win is really not settled yet for Matthew Overton, who might be feeling some pressure here, leading the race for the first time of the season, looking 8 minutes to go for his first win of the season. And there's perpetually Norm Graf, who sometimes is helpful to create a buffer to Ross Smith, at other times is stressful, because he's trying to get around him. Norm Graf in the Hypercar AM lead battle sandwich. As Ross Smith is now looking racy on Norm Graf, and in Ross Smith's perspective, if he's faster than Norm Graf, then it's not helpful to have Norm in front. It's really not, which again plays back into the hands of Matthew Overton, and this is what happens when you have cross-class with the same machinery. And at this point as well, who has looked after their tires the best? Who's got the best set of rubber underneath him? Now, Tom Nacella has served his penalty and coming out right behind Craig Dans in the Bentley. As Walter de Bruyn trying to come through these guys. Gets through one, can't quite cleanly get through the other of Craig Dans. He'll have to go two wheels on the grass to do so. But he does get through, and Nacella's bumper keeps disappearing. I'm not sure if that's visual or if the bumper's gone. And rFactor thinks it's there for a second and then realizes, no, yeah, it is gone. So it's kind of flicking on and off, which is very weird. At minimum, there might be some damage. Now, here we go. Ross Smith with a huge draft on the back straight. Graf has to contend with GT traffic ahead. Smith might be looking to the inside of the chicane, not quite close enough to do it. Overton clears the GT car ahead. Maintains that GTM lead. Graf's exit was a little bit compromised to duck to the inside of the GT car, but Ross's exit wasn't much more impressive. As Graf is over the high curbs, hurting his exit, doesn't have an impact to the gap to Smith too much. As Vinicius Gonzalez is all over the back of Boyce through Eau Rouge. Gonzalez and Boyce might be looking at something at the end of the Kemmel Straight like these guys are right here. Ross Smith, 0.2 difference, but still not close enough to have any move as they're going to have another bit of GT traffic ahead of them. Gonzalez unable to do something either with Lalonde now in the way there. Was he missing a wing there? Was the Valkyrie? No, he's fine. As we have Francesco coming through on his bit of a recovery drive in the Ferrari. Potentially, Francesco needed a little bit of a splash. As off track goes Jason Whitehead. Still in this pursuit of Espinaldo, by the way. I've been keeping an eye on them. It's just hanging around a second and a half. He's not quite able to do it as Nacella still trying to get around Dans in the Bentley. Around 30th overall. We haven't really had many retirements despite the mass of drivers that we have. Only 4 retirements. Staying back with Nacella and Dan's now on the back straight. That might be Tom Lane ahead of them. Second in GT AM. Nacella's going to let some traffic through. In doing so, obviously creates the gap. There's just an absolute traffic jam, and that's including our hypercar leaders in AM category. Finally get through. Nacella kind of loses out big time. But so did Matthew Overton, who gets a tag from Norm Graff, and Ross Smith is back in it. The three of them are line astern again. Smith and Overton trying to fight for the AM lead with Norm Graff stuck in the middle of it. Not able to clear them, not wanting to give it up. He gets a better run through Eau Rouge as Tom Lane checks up Matthew Overton just slightly. Norm Graff barely avoiding the nose of Tom Lane. Smith probably had the cleanest run out of all of them. Will back out of it. Into the chicane though. Absolutely all kicking off between these guys. The Hypercar AM lead is probably the one that isn't decided, and it's happening right here in front of us. Dan Kirby looks absolutely set to take the lead with a 20-second advantage over John, with their teammate Bernaldo holding off the advances of Whitehead to the tune of 1.5 seconds still. And this is Overton and Smith for Hypercar AM. Just a second split. They happen to have a Ferrari in between them still. Brandon Gant continues to lead overall in GT and in GT Pro, and Jamie Zalecki second overall in the GTs with a few seconds advantage, quite a few seconds advantage over Tom Lane in second. Matt Boyce has climbed back up though to third in GTM, so salvaging his run as Smith gets a little bit on the grass, locks up, almost tags the rear of Norm Graff as he continues his pursuit. What he would like to be, Matthew Overton has got a Ferrari in front of him. As the sun comes out for the last 2 minutes, everything gets a little bit shiny. Was that Overton off to the side? Or is that Jerry Chen coming out? That is Overton. Overton spun up. And this is absolutely on for the win in Hypercar AM. Norm Graff has finally cleared the Hypercar AMs, and they are free to do battle. Ross Smith finally sees Overton as the car just ahead of him is go around the outside of GT traffic. Norm Graff is trying to go around the outside of Matthew Overton. Overton was probably trying to look to the inside of him as Graff had to contend with that GT traffic first as Ross Smith goes to the inside and Overton spins. Matthew Overton spins out as Smith dives to the inside, and he'll let him back through. That might be the result we stand with. Let's switch back and see where Dan Kirby is. Dan Kirby, this could be his final lap. There's 50 seconds on the board. And he's got an entirety of a Sector 2 and a Sector 3 to contend with. Dan Kirby absolutely stomping his authority on this race. Fantastic run from Dan Kirby, and it looked to be very, very clean as well. I don't think he was really in the thick of it at all. By the way, this isn't over. Between Ross Smith and Matthew Overton, Overton got checked up a little bit with some GT traffic. The Hypercar AM lead refuses to be decided. Dan Kirby, oh, as Overton spins out, that was on his own doing. That was on his own doing as Overton looked to the inside of the Porsche. That will give the lead of AM to Ross Smith on the final lap of the race. That's a big deficit that Overton would have to make up there. That might have actually decided it. with a solid 0.0 seconds, starting their final lap as Dan Kirby is going to bring home the win. 20 seconds adrift of his teammates in second and third. It's a CMS Pro 1-2-3 led by Dan Kirby. John Uyan is going to be coming home in second. 20 seconds adrift, 15 seconds adrift of Kirby, and Bernaldo a handful of seconds back still, with Jason Whitehead not able to put the pace in that final stint to really catch up. Now, drivers who haven't finished the race include Ross Smith, now in the lead of Hypercar AM well and truly with a few seconds advantage back to Matthew Overton, who has a few seconds advantage to Jerry Chen. So this is 1, 2, and almost 3 at the back of the shot there of our Hypercar podium. Let's take a look at what's going on the GT side. Brandon Gant winning GT overall, and of course in the GT Pro by virtue of that same feat. Going to be doing the chicane for the final time. Brandon Gant brings home the win in GT, a comfortable win by all accounts. His nearest competitor, John Mayer, in second place. Jamie Zalecki, joined by our Hypercar AM leader. This is the GT AM leader, so the AMs will cross the line together. Ross Smith takes the victory in Hypercar AM as Jamie Zalecki takes the victory in GT AM. We have a new winner in GT AM, and their name is Jamie Zalecki. And Matthew Overton, so close to his first win of the Hypercar AM season. But that's gonna do it. Tom Lane and John Mayer still crossing the line there to wrap up that. John Mayer second in the GT Pros. George Angelidis will bring home a podium in the GT Pros as well, with Tom Lane finishing second in GT AMs. But Matt Boyce didn't let him get away too much on points. So Tom Lane will take the lead in the championship outright there in the GT AMs, but Matt Boyce, recovery drive to a podium. What a race here at Spa. There was about 5 minutes where I had a break. All right, let's look at some results. And we'll go by class. How about that? So, session results. Dan Kirby from John Uyan and Ernest Bernaldo, a CMS Pro 1-2-3. Jason Whitehead, the first of the Valkyries, followed by Walter de Bruyn, got the better of Norm Graff in the second half of that race and did convert it to a 5th place, with Francesco potentially needing a splash, which dropped him a couple lines down the order. And Gilles Lalonde made up some places in the chaos that was the Ben Borman incident and the Francisco needing potentially that splash. So Lalonde comes home in 7th. In the Hypercar AM field, the stars of the show today, Ross Smith, Matthew Overton, and Jerry Chen, giving it everything between the three of them. Ross Smith and Matthew Overton wasn't decided until the last lap, starting the last lap in Hypercar AM. A fantastic battle between them. Bob Robertson, the 80-odd-year-old, comes home, finishing the race in 6th, with Moyne and Benchka in 4th and 5th, respectively. And that's how your Hypercar AMs have played out on this fair day. In the GTs, another small field on our GT side, but Brandon Gant with an authoritative win in GT Pro and GT overall, with John Mayer and George Angelidis bringing home a massive result for the HPD team, and they will extend their championship lead quite handily as a result of that, as we were missing the Mustangs out on this event. In GT AM, Zalecki breaks the Lane and Boyce duo of wins. Tom Lane still comes home second, though, and Matt Boyce still comes home third. But Jamie Zalecki has added a win to his name. Barry DiMazzo comes home in fourth with Hagenars, Jones, and Manuel Stoll down in seventh. James Bowders, Dean Cheesby, and Filippo Marazzi, who had a little bit of a hard time in some of the earlier stages of the race. I'm realizing that a handful of our retirements and such didn't show up in those results, but nevertheless, let's see if we have. Everybody's here. Let's bring in Mr. Dan Kirby. Second. Made it look easy out there. How'd it go?
Pretty good. Yeah, I just had enough pace to manage fuel and tires the whole time, really.
And the tires was a one-stopper, obviously, so tires were good at the end. You clearly had the pace. I mean, John had a stomping win on NARS, and you just put 20 seconds on him on top of his pace.
Yeah, on the NARS race, I accidentally took tires, so that put me back another 20-something seconds. But yeah, this race, I no change tires, and they held on pretty well.
Yeah, massive congrats. And we're missing Jake Sanson, who typically runs the interviews. So, but from a championship perspective, so you're a little bit of a part-time driver. This is a second win, though, in I believe only your third race here at WSC. So obviously CMS Pro 1, 2, 3. And
yeah, that's pretty solid.
Excellent job.
Because of my work schedule, I'm only going to make like a few of the races. So.
Oh, that's unfortunate because you definitely would be a player for the championship battle.
Yep.
Well, massive congrats, Dan. A stamping win overall and in Hypercar.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's bring in Ross Smith, our Hypercar AM winner, and it wasn't resolved until the beginning of the last lap. Ross Smith.
What's up, Troy?
How did it go?
I'm drenched. Oh my God.
I bet.
That was a hell of a race. It started off so gentle and easy, no issues. Got into traffic and kind of cut through. Ended up getting kind of stuck up with Norm after the first stop.
Yep.
And I don't know if you saw any of that, but he was a bit aggressive to get by, and I understand. I just couldn't find a good spot to let him through, especially with Matt there. I wanted to kind of keep him as a pick if I could. And it started kicking off. I just had so much GT traffic in front of me. It seemed like every time I was on a fast straight, there was always a GT like right at the beginning of it where I need to get on the power, or cutting across at like just past Radeon, and I'd have to get full on the brakes. In fact, I smashed in the back of one of the Ferraris. I think it was Marazzi. But Matt did not make it easy. He got the pass, and I was like, well, maybe he'll pull an Overton. And he did just on the last lap, or second two, somewhere around there, when he tucked it in at La Source. And that was enough to kick it off. And then he went sailing. I don't even remember where now, because it was all just a blur.
Yeah, absolutely. The Norm Graf situation played a factor as the three of you, you and Overton are trying to fight for the Hypercar AM win. And Norm Graf is sometimes helping you, sometimes hurting you. And for Matt Overton's side, sometimes helping him, sometimes hurting him. So Norm gave as good as he got in terms of the battle between the three of you guys. But yeah, and then there was a move into one of the hairpins at the end of Sector 1 and a little bit of collision. So what happened there?
Well, actually, there were two of them. One of them was so Matt was there, and there were, I think, four of us in a pack, 2 by 2, and it looked like Norm was going to back. In fact, he'd gotten on the brakes earlier, so I was like, okay, well, I'll just kind of tuck down the inside now, and he gave me the boop. So I don't know if he saw that as like cutting in the braking zone, and he didn't like that. I mean, I understand it. I thought that there was room there, but then the second time, I was tucked up behind one of the Porsches, the GTs, going the turn prior a few laps later, and I think it was Stephen Miller. I was just kind of riding behind him, waiting for the run down to the carousel, and I got a tap right there just as I was getting on power. And man, it was not great. I almost went right into the wall, but he got by, and I'm like, okay, fine. There, he's passed. And then just after that, going through Puhan, I think it was Craig Dance was sideways, and Norm jumped out of the way, barely missed him. I couldn't believe he did that, but he went spinning off. I'm like, okay, well, he'll be back, and he was.
Awesome stuff, Ross. Congrats on the Hypercar Am win, and it was absolutely the star of the show in terms of class lead battles. So well done.
Thanks. Glad it was fun for you guys, and thanks again. I guess you were going solo, but really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, no problem. All right, let's bring in Jamie Zalecki, our GT Am leader, second overall in GT. Jamie, how'd it go?
Hey Troy, it was really good. We unloaded off the truck really fast.
Yeah, definitely had the pace, and you've broken the Tom Lane, Matt Boyce chain of wins. So you are now finally there's a third winner in GT Am. So I mean, how does that feel, and what do you think now from a points perspective?
Oh, it feels great. After last week, it was a good showing at Long Beach, but I thought, man, I missed 2 races and had an awful Sebring. I'm probably out of the picture, but I ran some numbers, and it looks like maybe there's a shot. So I think today really helped.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, we have Le Mans coming up. Le Mans is the next one for this series, I think. So obviously, like with a good showing there, I mean, anything is possible for you, my friend. And I mean, you outright beat them on pace. Like there was no incident for Lane or Boyce. So this was an outright win on pace. So that's got to give you more confidence to make that push as well.
Absolutely, yeah. The Aston Martin was absolutely hooked up through Eau Rouge and Radeon, and it looked like some of my competitors were having to either lift or tap the brakes going through, and I was able to hold it flat out. So that
Wow.
just gave me a ton of speed down Kemmel Straight against everybody else.
So you were actually taking Eau Rouge flat out?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, that's impressive. I was lifting in the hypercar. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, and then what did happen a couple races ago? Was it Long Beach or something where the car didn't work or something? You had to change car right as you were loading in?
Yeah, right as we kicked over to the race, suddenly the Aston just didn't exist anymore. So it was a last-minute car change, and I mean, I've been driving the Aston for months now. I didn't know what to go with, so I just picked the McLaren, and I decided to start at the back so that in case it was a little shaky, I didn't kill anybody, and it just had a lot of pace and some pit strategy, and we got up there and were able to finish P2.
Yeah, that is the part of the story as well. I mean, absolutely crazy that got pulled off, but massive congrats, Jamie. It was a fantastic race today. Not only second overall and leader, of course, in GTM. Does it surprise you, by the way, that there's such a large GTM field and such a small GT Pro field in some of these races?
A little bit, yeah. I was surprised that there were hardly any GT Pro guys here today, and then I was doubly surprised at just how fast all the GTM guys were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the second place GT Pro was 4th or 5th overall in GT, so absolutely the AMs came out to party, and you led that party, so well done, my friend.
Thank you, Troy. Hope to see you up here again next time.
Yeah, for sure, man. Make it happen. It's Le Mans. It's the big one. That's the one you want to win. And what a good segue, actually, to our upcoming races. So to kick it off for the rest of May, we're going to have the 230 kilometers of Monza in the 91s, and May 21st, the first of the big ones, the 2.4 hours of Le Mans for the 91s as well. And then we'll have our big points event and our dual driver event, the 4.8 hours of Le Mans, June 18th in the VWSC. So from all of us here at VWSC CMS, the Storm Gang Simulations team, I've been Troy Udon. You guys have been awesome, and we'll see you next time.
This could be the chance for Stoll. He's gaining. He's not going to split them up the middle. He's done it. He's going on board with John Huyard. Huyard's going to connect. He comes off to the inside. There's no one, and he's going to finish. He tried his best. How did he catch it?